Hello everybody, how's your headspace? Welcome to video 13. Trauma is top of the tree. Trauma is a big one, and there is often a lot to unpack. I can merely touch on it in one video. Now, I'm not an expert psychologist and I can only go by my own experiences and interpretations. If you are affected by any of the subject matter in this video, links will be in the description so you can seek support. Bear with me on this video, please. Watch until the end. There's a reason I brought you to this spot. Now, I'm a firm believer that everybody goes through life carrying some form of trauma, whether it be mental form or physical form. Let's face it, life can be a rocky ride for most of us, especially for those who dare to dream. I see trauma at the top of the tree. It's kind of like the final boss, if you will. The hardest thing to process with regards to trauma is when it happens to a child. They are innocent beings who should be having fun and being exactly that, innocent children. They have no control over what some animals inflict upon them. What you have to remember is it can shape the rest of their life. I've noticed in some cases of childhood trauma, it can lay dormant like a sleeper agent and awaken well into adult years, ready to feed and torment the soul that it is occupying. Sometimes people are not aware of this until it's too late. They think it's well in the past, or at the time their brain recognises it as an unsavoury event, and it simply stops recording as a survival response. Someone likened childhood trauma as someone planting a parasite in you. It feeds without you even knowing it's there. It can redirect your life's path and lead to many cases of displacement and feelings of emotions, anxiety, depression, addiction, insecurity, guilt and grief. The list goes on. Of course, trauma can lead to more trauma. Now, while most of us have had a happy childhood, trauma can happen in adolescence. It could be something that you have witnessed at work or on the road, like a tragic car accident. It could be witnessing the passing of a loved one. There is no hard and fast rule for trauma, and it does not discriminate. Man, woman or child, you will likely experience it at some point. I've experienced quite a few times in childhood, teenage years and adolescence, and if it's taught me anything, it's that I'm not made of glass. I'm still here, and so are you. I will tell you a story from when I was 11 years old. I was over the park with a childhood friend, and we've known each other since we were born. We were on our bikes doing wheelies, as you do, and we was in the middle of a field with nobody around, or so I thought. I noticed a young man around 18 years of age on a bike and another lad on foot walking quickly behind him. The lad on the bike summoned us over by saying, "Come here." My friend rode over without question, but I remember feeling a sense of unease. I carried on riding, albeit slowly, as I was in a very low gear. He blocked me off and I was forced to stop, and his accomplice, who was on foot, held the back of my seat, so I was trapped. He told me to get off my bike. I said in a very shaky voice that I would not get off my bike. Then he produced a huge kitchen knife and held it to my throat and said, "Now will you get off your bike?" I remember at the time feeling so helpless and powerless, and a sense of injustice. Growing up, we were poor in terms of financially, and that was the first brand new bike that I had that my nan and granddad had bought for me. I idolised them, and I still do, so that bike had sentimental value. The worst thing was, as it was taken from me, I remember having to watch it being ridden across the field and disappear to a speck for what seemed like an eternity. My childhood friend's house actually backed onto that park and was only about 150 metres away, so we went there after. I remember feeling like I never wanted to feel that way ever again in my life. I held it together until my friend's mum answered the door, and she said, "Didn't you have a bike with you? Where is your bike?" I had tears in my eyes as I explained what had unfolded. She gave me a lift home, and as I explained to my parents what had happened, my dad was jumping up and down like a crazed caveman, blaming me for going over the park. It was all my fault. My dad doesn't really do compassion. So the police were called and I had to attend the local station and give my account of what had happened, which was quite daunting at 11. They linked him to an earlier robbery. In fact, the bike that the knifeman was riding was stolen just mere hours before. Weeks passed and I was meant to attend an ID parade, but my parents didn't tell me when it was. To be honest, I'd forgotten all about it. I asked my parents later on in life about why I never attended, and they'd decided at the time that I'd been through enough. I never did get my bike back, and I never found out what happened to the knifeman, but if I saw him today, I would shake his hand. No hard feelings. In fact, I would thank him for shaping my life in a positive way. Yes, it was a horrible, traumatic ordeal at the time, but as a result of that day, I sought out martial arts and self-protection schools. I've studied many systems on and off for nearly 25 years. I've made some lifelong friends, and as a result, even had employment through some of these circles. That day, although I didn't realise at the time, went on to save my life in another violent mugging some 18 years later. Now, as I touch on this and the finer details, it might make some of the more squeamish amongst you wince, so I'll try and keep it as PC as possible, but it's got to be the truth. So picture the scene. I'm on the way into town. It's 8 o'clock on a Monday night. Only a few are on the top deck of the bus. I'm meeting a very good friend who I hold in the highest regard for a bloody good beer and to put the world to rights. I decided to call my dear Nan just to check in and tell her that I love her. As I'm doing this, I notice a guy climb the stairs of the bus, red-eyed and frothing slightly at the mouth. I could feel his energy was off before the smell of stale alcohol filled the air. If rabies and zombies had a love child, this was him, a walking red flag. His eyes scanned the deck for a victim, someone perceived as weaker. I sensed I'd lit up his radar, so I held my voice steady and said goodnight to my Nan. As she too can feel energy, even a hint of a decibel raise in the wrong direction or an unexpected octave change, and she would be up all night worrying. As I got off the phone, I just managed to get my finger on the lock button as Mr. Red Flag, coiled like a cobra, sprung into action. My phone was snatched. Time stood still. I was 11 again, only this time with 18 years of combatives, like ace cards up my sleeves. Plus, I'd just done a 2-hour flinging session with some kettlebells, and I was throwing them round like a juggling act for the circus. Adrenaline filled my body like a damn wall had been burst. Not for fear, but for justice. I'm not being made to feel small, helpless and meek. Not now, not ever. I'm an adult now, and I've got 18 years of training, and it has led me to this point. I leaped out of my seat and slapped my phone out of his hands. It was on like Donkey Kong. We grappled for position, and I threw him across the seats and hit him once, bouncing his zombie head off the bus window. A fellow passenger started shouting, "Leave it out, mate." As I've tried to explain, he jumped up and put me across the seats, with him snarling and foaming at the mouth. Now he's really turned it up to 11. Absolute schoolboy error on my part. I took my eyes off the opponent. I'm now in the worst position possible, up a creek with no paddle. I grab him by the throat and by the back of the knee, and I make sure to be especially spiteful and pinch all of the nerve endings. I got to my feet and I rammed him against the railing. "Let me go or I will bite your neck." And with that, I could hear his teeth biting down millimetres from the left side of my neck. I tried to push his head away, but his strength was incredible, so I had no choice. Get bitten and risk bleeding out, or ram my thumb into his eye socket and dig around to switch him off. I grabbed the back of his head and proceeded to gouge up to my knuckles in fluid, blood and pus. He finally weakened onto one knee. I'd taken his will and I'd switched him off. The bus had stopped by this point and the driver had come up the stairs to announce that the police were on their way. I backed up and I found my phone surprisingly undamaged under a seat, and I quickly pocketed it. My attacker, dazed and stumbling, tried to exit on hearing police mentioned, and through desperation, he punched the poor bus driver stood at the top of the stairs. I later learned that the bus driver was near retirement age and was currently battling cancer. He was a pleasant chap named Eric. I made sure to write to the CEO of his company to commend Eric for his bravery and professionalism. It made me very displeased to see bad things happen to good people. So as the assailant made his way to the bottom of the stairs, I jumped on from the top of the stairs onto his back, and I began to choke him unconscious. As his stature, once an almighty tower of strength and stamina, began to buckle, I managed to execute a near-perfect hip throw. I landed on top of him with my entire 90 kilos landing on his chest, straight into a scarf hold, with a neck crank for added reassurance. I squeezed the life out of him like a Scotsman squeezing the air out of a set of bagpipes. He was moving my entire 90 kilos up and down. I could not believe his strength and sheer stamina, as I was starting to tire. I was in a position to lever him, but I already had the dominant position, so I showed some mercy. I checked on Eric, and although dazed, he was largely uninjured, and he remained compassionate and professional throughout, ushering the remaining passengers out of harm's way, and more importantly, out of the arena. As I checked, I made another error. I took my eyes off the opponent. Never take your eyes off the opponent. I felt a sharp pain in my left hand and felt the warm trickle across the back of it. He was like a dog with a bone. His teeth marks remained in the back of my hand for a few years after. I hit him once, which was enough for his rabid mouth to release. I looked at the digital time display on board. We'd been going at it for 15 minutes. Adrenaline starting to wear. I was wondering when Plod would arrive. At that moment, an off-duty cop had seen us battling through the window and gave assistance. He tried to sit him up and get the classic arm up the back technique, but the rabid dog was too strong, and he grabbed the cop's glasses off his face and proceeded to crush them to dust. I had to subdue him again. I literally had his fingers bent back, touching the back of his hands, in order to stop him spitting blood in my face and prevent his dirty fingernails clawing marks into my angelic appearance. Finally, after an epic 20-minute battle, I could see blues and twos in the distance. I stepped off and let them take over, sweating, bloodied and exhausted. The rain felt amazing. Eric, bless him, was waiting with a cup of water. I felt like I was at the finish line of a triathlon. Just then my phone rings. It's my friend that I'm meant to be meeting, wanting to know where I am and why I'm late. Bad tear-up on the bus. We'll explain later. He arrived just as the thief was being led away in cuffs, and stupidly, Zombie Crackhead had some inspirational parting words to the tune of, "I will come back and do X, Y, and Z to you and your family." I simply replied, "You had your chance on the bus. Don't drop the soap, eh?" We never did get down the pub that night. I spent it in the hospital waiting to be seen for my gnawed-on hand and a tetanus jab. I later learned they had linked him to a previous robbery about 10 miles away, where he'd taken a woman's phone and money. So a real upstanding citizen? I think not. I didn't know at the time, but he was remanded in jail from that night. But I was walking around changing my appearance in the hope that I would not be recognised and have X, Y, and Z carried out to me or my family. I will tell you one last story that ties all this in. So fast forward 10 years to only a few months ago. I'd been to see a friend who had fallen on hard times and wasn't feeling very well mentally. We had a good catch up, and we tried to sort the thousands of puzzle pieces into some sort of order to make life more manageable. After the 2-hour train journey home, I arrived at my local train station, and all I could think about was a hangover cure. I needed food. As I exited the busy station, it was heaving with people shopping and lunchtime trade. As I was walking towards my chosen eatery, I was drawn towards a gang of about 6 teenagers. I tried not to stare, but something was telling me to take note. I turned to face them with the cover of lighting a cigarette. I could see that they'd formed a kind of semicircle around another boy, on his own, who appeared much smaller than the others. Were they all just friends, just hanging out? It didn't feel right to me. I saw the look on the young lad's face, which I instantly recognised as one of fear, smallness, and innocence. He was desperately cornered. As I lit my cigarette, one of the bully boys yanked the man bag from the victim. It took me back to that day in the park when I was just 11 years old. I momentarily felt what that lad was feeling. I was 11 again, in that moment, isolated and scared. I knew what I had to do. I was put here in the right place at the right time. I'd seen many posts on local community groups describing this exact gang, stealing belongings from kids and stealing their innocence. Mothers would often write about the aftermath, stating that their son was left too traumatised and too scared to leave the house. It's showtime. I approached and went full dad mode. "Wait, give that back." The gang, stunned, turned as I approached, hungover and hungry. They must have sensed I was displeased at their blatant liberty-taking. As I got near the leader clutching the bag, he sprinted off like a greyhound out of the blocks. I gave chase the best I could, but weighing 95 kilos and with an overnight bag on my back, I'm not going to be breaking the 4-minute mile. I got close, but I couldn't quite grab the back of his hood, so I swept the back of his legs, causing him to cartwheel to the floor. I grabbed the bag, with the robber still attached momentarily, dragging him along the floor with it. We tussled back and forth for a bit, and I managed to prise the bag free of his greedy grasp. By now, a crowd of about 100 had stopped to try and fathom what this broad daylight chaos was all about. I ran back up the road and gave the boy his bag back and told him to get out of here quick as I pushed him into the train station. I wanted that boy to know that there are still good people in this world and he can still have faith in humanity. I didn't want another innocent soul added to the trauma list. The gang by now were circling like sharks. I shouted to the crowd to watch out for those thieves. This distracted everyone and allowed me to escape unnoticed to my favourite restaurant. I was getting some strange looks from the waitress as I sat there, knife and fork in hand, sweating and out of breath. I just joked that I didn't want to miss the lunchtime special. So, what can we take away from this? What was the point of me telling you those stories on trauma? Trauma is a fact of life. It does not, however, have to be a life sentence. That parasite that gets planted and attacks and feeds on your soul can be starved and exorcised from your body. There is a reason I brought you here, to this spot. You see, we can learn a lot from nature. I want you to pay particular attention to this tree. This beautiful tree. It's functioning and it's tall. It's proud and it's thriving in life. Now let me show you something. I've got to try and climb this fence, which is also an electric fence. God, getting too old for that. You see this tree? It suffered unimaginable trauma at some point in its life. Either by way of lightning strike, or fire, or both. It has still been able to live a fulfilled existence, and so can you. You see, grapes must be crushed to make wine. Diamonds form under pressure. Olives are pressed to release oil, and seeds still grow in darkness. You are in a powerful place of transformation when this happens. Trust the process. I will leave you with my warmest wishes, and I hope this video helps towards conquering your demons. The biggest gift that you can give is to conquer yourself. Thank you for staying until the end, and don't forget to ask your nearest and dearest, how's your headspace?